Hello, everyone. I am Jennifer Quesnel. I'm the host of Dear Beth, a Women in Law podcast, and we are thrilled to be here today as we launch the book, Creating a Seat at the Table, Reflections from Women in Law. Now, we have two of the book's co-editors here in the audience. Can we please give a warm welcome to Leah Howie and to Bree Loewenberger. The third editor of the book, right here with us on the stage, and she will be our co-host during today's discussion. Yes, it is the same Beth that we named the podcast after. Please welcome Beth Bilson, Casey. Now, at this point, I would like to turn things over to Heather Haven, the Associate Dean of Law here at the University of Saskatchewan, for a few opening remarks. Heather.
Thanks, Jennifer. Oh my goodness, this is so lovely. I love that Jennifer Quesnel is here doing this. She is a host. You can just hear it in her voice. I'm just so pleased. As Jennifer said, my name is Heather Haven, and I am a faculty member here at the College of Law, and I'm here in my official capacity as the Associate Dean Academic here at the college. But I'm also here because I am so incredibly proud. I'm getting tears here. I'm incredibly proud of the work that has gone into this project. I'm so pleased about this entire podcast, but particularly about the book, the product of a really genuine collaboration that has happened over the past couple of years. And big shout out again goes to the three incredible editors in this. Beth Bilson, who has been a colleague and a mentor of mine for absolutely years. Leah Howie, Bree Loewenberger. We couldn't have the dynamism at the college if it weren't for these incredible women that are here. I am going to say that they have created a product that provides collective experiences and wisdom for everyone in the legal profession. And I know it is going to be a must-read for new and existing members of the profession. This event is hosted at the College of Law, and we are situated on the Saskatchewan campus, which is located in Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. And as such, we give our deep respect and thanks to the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place, and we reaffirm our relationship with one another. And affirming our relationship is another very important to me and important to the College of Law. Respecting diversity that we have in the College of Law and in the legal profession and in Saskatchewan is an important part of being in authentic relationship with one another. Taking steps to recognize our differences and celebrating those differences and honoring them is part of respecting diversity and moving towards authentic inclusion of all people. Inclusion that aims for equality for all people, and inclusion that commits to taking steps to promote equity. The College of Law is committed to these authentic relationships, and it's through projects like this podcast, this book, Creating a Seat at the Table, that gives us an opportunity to celebrate one another and our incredible collective that we've brought together. So you haven't come here to listen to me. You've come here to listen to these incredible women and our incredible host. So I'm going to turn it back over to Jennifer Quesnel to get things started.
Thank you so much, Heather. And yes, I think we are really grateful to be able to have these conversations, to be able to tell these stories here on Treaty 6 territory. And like the book, this is why we're here today. We want to share lived experiences of women. Women who, like many of the people in this room, went to law school, graduated law school, worked in law, left the law in some cases, sometimes have come back. These are things that can be challenging, they can be messy. Sometimes these are experiences that are eye-opening, and we're here for it. We want to know what happened and what can we learn from it. So our co-host here, familiar to everyone who's ever been through the doors of the College of Law at the University of Saskatchewan. Now, if that's not you, if you're unfamiliar, here's what you need to know about Dear Beth. Beth Bilson, KC, well, she joined the College of Law as a faculty member in 1979. She has been Dean of Law, I think 3 times, Dean of Education. She has served as University Secretary, and today she is our podcast queen and co-host. Please welcome Beth Bilson.
I want you to know the title wasn't my idea.
Who is here joining us on stage? I'm going to let you do the introductions.
Okay. On my left is Amelia Lowe-Muller, who's in-house counsel with the Saskatchewan Health Authority. Adrienne Forgeron has her own law practice called The Gentle Lawyer. Glazer is a senior partner and litigator at McKercher LLP. Jaime Lavallee is a faculty member in the College of Law at the University of Saskatchewan. And Rachel Loewen-Walker is a gender studies professor at the University of Saskatchewan. Welcome.
You may have noticed the common theme that keeps popping up through the book, through this podcast, is gender equity. And I mean, Beth, as somebody who's worked in this field for decades, it stuck in my head when on the podcast she came on and said, you know, in 1979, I thought so much would have changed. Over the years, some things have changed, and for the better, some things have not. And I guess compared to what you thought the world of law would be like at this point in time, where would you say we're falling short?
I think that there still are more subtle ways that the legal profession and society discriminate against women. I think women still face challenges in terms of balancing their outside obligations, whatever those are, family, their wish to be in the Olympics or whatever it is, find it hard to balance that with a career and often feel they have to make a choice about whether to have a legal career or other kinds of interests and obligations. I also think that that women still find it hard to feel that they belong in the legal profession. And that's sad to me, because I think if you read the stories in this book, you will find 18 women who fought to find a place in the legal profession and to make it clear that they belong there. But I think that particularly law students and young women lawyers often feel that there's some question about their legitimacy as members of the legal profession.
Well, and Jamie and Christine, I'm actually going to throw this one at you. We all kind of know what a microaggression is, those little things that get under your skin, but often you say nothing. We've all heard a few sexist jokes, but there are sometimes even more serious challenges, examples of discrimination in the workplace, and especially if you're early on in your career, speaking up or saying something about it or doing something about it doesn't always feel comfortable. Just reflecting back on your careers, have you seen examples of this? And what is the best thing to do if you're early on and yet you know there's behavior you need to put a stop to?
I might say when I was a young lawyer, one of my associate colleagues expressed the view that the associate women in the firm were being put on a pedestal. And that was stated to a number of male lawyers in the firm, and I felt it was contagious and potentially damaging to the role of women in the firm because of the sense that they were being favored. And of course, at the time, we're talking about the late 1980s, early 1990s. There was no favoritism to women in the legal profession. And by that time, I had established a male mentor who I trusted and was a senior person in the firm. And I expressed the view that I'm concerned about this statement and the impact on the relationship of the women and the male associates and others in the firm. And the response of that senior mentor was, boys will be boys. And it was one of those moments where I had to draw a line and say, no, no, that is not right. And we talked it out, and my mentor quickly realized that this was one of those watershed moments and took it upon himself to have a discussion with that young male lawyer that that's just an inappropriate comment to make in the firm, and we will not have it as a partnership. And so that is an example of how I went about in my way at that time of dealing with something that was painful and hurtful and potentially damaging to the relationship in the firm between the women and the men who were practicing law together.
Jaime, I can see you writing. I know you've got thoughts on this, but just in terms of jumping that hurdle and speaking up where you need to, where are examples where you've seen this work or not work?
First of all, I just want to introduce myself for those that don't know me. I'm Dr. Jaime Lavallee, and I'm also a Muskeg Lake Cree citizen. That's usually first and foremost one of the descriptors that I use for myself, even before faculty at the University of Saskatchewan. I know that for myself, it is tremendously hard sometimes to speak up. It is also tremendously needed. I have written a little bit about this. Some of it is culturally inappropriate to speak up sometimes for yourself, but yet it's not culturally inappropriate necessarily to speak up for someone else. So sometimes I have to pretend that I'm my own auntie and just say something. I do know that even now, this past year, when a comment was made that I felt was grossly inappropriate, and then I asked why they didn't comment and I had to. But the thing is that, at least for myself, I believe that if you look around and someone is not speaking up, they are probably checking out and going to leave. So I know I told the faculty, I told the dean that the minute I stop talking in these faculty meetings is when you know I'll stop being part of this faculty. So I need your support. I need you to, during my 10-second count, to speak up, because it shouldn't just be me. And I know that I have been in tons of unsafe situations. Sometimes you can speak up, sometimes you can't. I do say that check to see if you can be physically safe before you move on. And one of the reasons why I came into academia was because of the lateral violence and sexual harassments that I was getting in outside of this place. And I know I was asked, like, when are you going to come back to the Indigenous organization realm? And I said, well, once those stop, because right now I would rather put up with racial and sexist and those intersections, discrimination and structural challenges and barriers in an academic setting than to have that lateral violencing or that sexual harassment coming from my own people. So I have no way to tell you when to or when not to, but I do know that if you sit there and you ruminate on it at like 12:01 a.m. and you're supposed to get up at 4 a.m. or something like that, then that's the time when you felt you should have, and start thinking about how you can.
Thank you so much for that, Jaime. And I'm actually going to ask you to pass the mic over to Rachel, because I know you're listening to this and we can all see it. Discrimination can be amplified, especially for folks who are queer, for folks who are non-binary, non-gender conforming. If you're living with a disability, if you're a person of color, the ability to speak up is a privilege that just isn't really afforded equally to everyone. And I guess when you hear Jaime say, sometimes I have to be my own auntie, and that sometimes she just really wishes there was somebody else out there also speaking up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Jaime has shared how hard it is, done a great job of sharing how hard it is to speak up in those instances. And I would say what that makes me think about is how valuable it is not to speak for people, not to speak up on behalf of, but really to recognize what's going on around us and speak with and amplify. There's been some shift in language from, I still think allyship is a wonderful model, but shift from being an ally to being an accomplice. And what that means is being in there in the mud, in the grit, with people around us, with the queer community, with Indigenous women. As a queer woman myself, that has helped me immensely throughout my life, is people that can, we are paying attention to what's going on around us. We recognize that others are experiencing, others aren't always able to speak up or aren't comfortable. And that's our job, to step in and get into the mud with them. So I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle.
Actually, I've got you in my sights, Amelia and Chris. This is why I'm kind of interested in hearing your perspectives, just because of where you practice. And Amelia, I know you're with the Saskatchewan Health Authority. Last time I checked, it was like the single biggest employer in Saskatchewan, something like 40,000 employees. Chris, you're a senior litigator with McKercher. You're a partner. This is one of the biggest, most prestigious firms in the province. And I guess the part I'm thinking about now is setting boundaries, being your own auntie, advocating for yourself, promoting yourself, and especially when something doesn't feel right. Would you say that the size of the organization or firm makes any difference?
Of course it does, in the sense that smaller firms where divisions occur, it is much more disruptive and potentially divisive to raise issues. And so in a way, the larger entity is able to set boundaries, I believe, more firmly, and can have policies and deal with these issues in a way that's less divisive. Let's face it, in legal world in Saskatchewan, we are partners in a law firm, and you sit around the table. You don't sit around as a corporate entity, as you sit around as partners, and you have to come to terms with these issues. So they can be very disruptive, but generally a group will come to the right decision in the end. Whereas if you have a smaller entity, it might present bigger problems. Or if you have an entity with one or two individuals who are particularly strong in opinion and views, they may dominate the rest. So there's so many dynamics, and there's no one size fits all.
Amelia, I can see you have a few notes too. So does the size of firm make a difference? The size of your workplace, how much of a difference does it make?
Because it's my first time speaking, I just wanted to acknowledge that we are living in extremely difficult times, and I appreciate everybody being here. I think you can spend your time in all kinds of different ways, and it's very meaningful that people choose to come and listen to what I think is going to be a progressive conversation. In terms of the size of the organization, I think it always cuts both ways, because when you start looking at large systems, you can have the feeling that you're a cog in a machine. So you may see something and you may want to speak on it, but you're also pulled toward what are the political values in play at the time. If I speak out, does that impact my employment with this organization? Are there pressures coming from both below and above? So whereas in a smaller organization, you might feel more personal, like this has happened, I have a relationship with this person, I can approach it and we can deliberate and come up with a resolution. I would say in any given week, and my husband is here, he could say I come home and have a story about something that happened in some meeting where either I've chosen to speak up or I've chosen to not say anything, and that is going to be dependent on my audience, frankly.
And I'm going to come back to you, Rachel, just for a moment. Does that onus sort of fall on the person experiencing the discrimination or experiencing that aggression? Or, I mean, what are more practical ways we can help when that's not us, but we can see that they're in a bad spot? Who has the privilege and who can speak up and needs to?
The best way I can answer that question is just remind us of all of the great education that has gone in schools around don't be a bystander. I think it's the clearest way to remind ourselves of the accountability that we all have to those moments. If you're ever in a moment where it feels uncomfortable, where you're thinking, oh, they shouldn't have said that, then I think it is incumbent upon us to step in and to engage. I think there were some really powerful stories in the book about moments that authors shared where someone else lent a hand, stepped in, said something so that they didn't have to. And all of those moments have very huge ripple effects in terms of ensuring that people feel supported and that they come back the next day.
Yeah. So the person who's not talking for a long time, watch for them. They're about to check out. I keep thinking about that, Jaime. And actually, Beth, I think for a lot of the people who are listening, who may be going through interviews, who have maybe experienced situations where they're like, look, I'd like to say something, but I really don't want to lose where I'm at in this. When you feel like there's a lot at risk, you're early in your career, what's the best way to sort of process that in your head? What's the best way to respond in that same moment? Not at 3 a.m. when you're ruminating out on it later and finding the great comeback. In that moment, what advice would you give someone early in her career?
Well, I think building on some of the advice that's already been given, I think you have to pick your moments. I think I know that certainly if you're an articling student or a very junior lawyer, you're going to feel that your situation is somewhat precarious and it's risky to just put yourself out there and be nagging people all the time about what they've said that's inappropriate, because you're likely to be the loser in that situation. I think the advice that has been shared is that you have to look for your people. You have to look for who is going to support you, and have some confidence that if you speak up, someone is going to be at your side. When I started teaching law, there were 3 female faculty members, which is 3 more than there had been 2 years before that. And we were very dependent on our male colleagues for support. That is, we would not have been able to make the changes that were necessary in the law school, in the way that the law school operated, without the support of our male colleagues. And you have to feel those people out and find the people who will give you support. And I think there are plenty of them these days. I think there are lots of people in law firms and in legal organizations who are ready to support young lawyers, whether they're women or Indigenous lawyers or persons of color or persons with disabilities. But you have to, I think, sort of develop some relationships and put out feelers for those people. I think as Chris says, there are times when you want to say your piece, and I think that's appropriate. I think you can only respect yourself if when the chips are down, you actually say what you think. But I wouldn't recommend just wading in all the time. It will exhaust you and will kind of put you at risk, I think. So I would suggest looking for support.
Choose your people, choose your moments. Okay. And this is a pretty good segue to the next thing I wanted to ask about. And Adrienne, I want to bring you in on this one because we're talking values. We talk a lot about values on the podcast. And I'm looking, I guess, for examples of what works, what doesn't work when you're looking for a workplace that actually matches your values. How do you decide where you swipe right or not?
Ooh, swiping right.
Always a little dangerous.
Jen, if only you knew. I'm a connoisseur of swiping right in all of the ways. I have been on many first dates, both with men and in legal jobs. So, great question. I think there are a few things that I've learned. I've been a lawyer for nearly 15 years now. I have been on maybe triple that first dates. So I think that what I have learned over time is that it's really important to stay true to myself. Now, that being said, who I am evolves and grows over time. One of the things that I believed when I was just starting out was that I needed to get it right. I needed to get it right off the bat. I needed to find the right firm and somehow sell myself to that firm, to say, pick me, pick me. And I think to the students here, what I hope that you know is instead of saying pick me, say pick me. And I say that because when you say pick me, ask yourself who you really are. Because the potential employer, the firm or organization, they need to know who you are just as much as you need to know who they are. Firms really invest a lot of time and energy into articling students and junior lawyers. They don't want you to fail. For the most part, they don't want you to just put in the hours. It's a two-way street. So at the first stages of your practice, or your legal career, and as you develop and grow, make sure that you're representing who you really are. Just like on a dating app, make sure you know your deal breakers. So for me, my deal breakers when I was on Bumble, which is how I found my husband. So if you're in the throes, just keep going. My two deal breakers were, the first one was, I want to have children. The second deal breaker was, I want to live in a bunch of different places. So if you are very tied to Saskatchewan, we cannot be together. So consider it that way when you're looking for jobs, whether it's you're starting out or as you're transitioning into new roles. Make sure you know what your deal breakers are, and make sure you stick to them, because you're going to get into the job and feel very resentful if you don't. Just like on a bad date, or 6 dates in and you're like, oh my God, I should have said this earlier, because it was a waste of time for all of us.
And there's no shame in walking away and saying, actually, that was a deal breaker. I know I'm walking away from a well-paid job. I have student loans to pay. You can leave.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've done it many times.
One of the points you make on the podcast, though, is soak up what you can, even when it's a bad fit or not. You know it's not going to be a forever, but why did you make a point of saying that?
I have experienced a whole bunch of different jobs, and if you read the book and you read my chapter, you'll see that the history is in there. But one of the key lessons that I learned was that when I am in a role that I know that I will not be there forever, but I don't know how long I'll be there, it's really important for me to be present and to be with the people who surround me in that environment. I spent the first part of my career kind of jumping around and looking ahead to the exit and thinking of the exit plan. And what I really wish I would have done, and I said this on the podcast, is asked the women lawyers around me in that job, tell me everything. Tell me how to draft this, but also tell me how you balance kids and your career. I wish I would have asked those things. So know that if you are in a role that you know you're not going to be in forever, just be present, because it will change, and soak up as much as you can.
Could I just say that one of the things that sometimes worries me a bit is I think that law students, when they come to law school, sort of fall into the trap of, and whether it's upper year students, and you shouldn't listen to them at all, or other sources of information, who present some kind of template of the legal career that you must want. And I think law students sometimes give up some of their own agency when they're looking for legal jobs. And I think you really have to think carefully about what kind of life you want. It's your life. It's the only one you're going to have, as far as I know. So I think you need to think carefully about where you might want to be going, and develop some kind of way of assessing the options that will put you on a path that is one that will be constructive for you. I mean, you may want to be a securities lawyer at Bennett Jones. I mean, many people love doing that, but you may not. that might not be the career for you. And there's no sort of hierarchy of legal jobs that you need to feel apologetic about ending up as a family lawyer in a small firm in Saskatoon. I mean, I think you just need to think a lot about where it is you want to be.
Well, and this is one where I'm going to actually put the question to almost the whole group. I'll start with you, though, Chris. The habits that you pick up when you're in your 20s, once you're through law school and into those first jobs, what did you learn about yourself?
I learned in part that I had no expectations when I was hired to my articling position in Yorkton, and then later with my firm in Saskatoon. I did not walk through the threshold with the idea that I'm going to be a partner someday, or that this is my end game, because at that point in my career, and I think many of us probably are in similar circumstances today, I simply did not know that I had a career path in that firm. And in fact, there had never been a female partner. There were very few female lawyers. Why would I think I'm going to be a partner and this is my end spot?
Spoiler, she is a partner.
Well, but the point is, I didn't put my eggs in that basket. Never. My colleagues who were of the same vintage that joined the firm, like we were hired roughly around the same time, they all had their entire career. They were men. They had their whole career planned out. They were going to be partners in the firm. And that was the different expectations that I as a woman had compared to my male colleagues. So expectations are there to, in part, lead you, but they're also there to damage you. And so I would say that you develop your plan. I had the 5-year plan, and that was my savior. In 5 years, I'm going to reevaluate, and I will make a decision then as to where I go from here. But in the meantime, and I heard you say the same thing, I am going to get everything I can out of this bunch of really good lawyers. And I'm going to then be able to take it with me. Nobody can take that away from you. And so that's why those first 5 years to me were so critical, because I was building my legal career. And yes, I started out with the idea I was going to be a litigator, but did I really know that that's where I'm going to end up? I couldn't even public speak. I'd flail. My voice would start quivering. And here I am going into a courtroom in front of these male judges against male lawyers, and somehow I overcame that, but that didn't happen overnight. So all I'm saying is, it's good not to set up the end game at the early point in your career. I think you set yourself up potentially for disappointment.
I keep thinking about something that we call reflective practice, which, yes, also comes up in the book. And Adrienne, I know you've worked in healing arts as well as law, and when we're talking about reflective practice for men or for women, how do we apply that in a workplace setting?
Ooh, that's a good question. And I do feel as though we should ask Brie Loewenberger to just come up here and explain what reflective practice is. So she did her master's on reflective practice. So thank you, Brie. Also, thank you for giving me a little primer before this recording on what reflective practice was and is. Brie explained to me that reflective practice really is kind of what it sounds like, reflecting on your practice, which involves reflecting on self and then also reflecting critically. Is that right? Okay. About those around you and how they are impacted through the practice of law. I was and are engaged in healing aspects of life, and by that I simply mean awareness and consciousness. When I took a step back from the practice of law, I really got into consciousness work, and that's awareness about what's really going on around us. And what I've learned is that the legal system and the profession and academia, everything is just a paradigm. It's something that exists that we have created, but it's not the be-all and end-all. And another thing I learned was that at work and at play are natural laws. So I would encourage all of us to not buy into the belief that the legal system within which we operate is the only way that we must be, and especially for women. Really question when somebody tells you that this is the way it is. Really question it, because that's their belief and how they view it. But as Beth said, you can create whatever it is that you want. So when you went into law school, you likely had an idea of where you were going and what you wanted to do, or you maybe had a sense of the kind of work you wanted to do. Hold on to that, because that is going to lead you exactly where you need to go, even if you have a winding path to get there.
Don't let it change who you are.
Don't let it change who you are.
As we wrap up, and again, if you have a question, a thing you don't know the answer to, think about it. We will have a chance for you to ask anything of our presenters. That said, I'm going to come to each one of you around this table. Amelia, I'm going to start with you, and we'll wrap with you, Beth. But just if you can think of, or if you've had notes and you want to say something, are there practical examples of ways you can amplify and support other women and other people, many of whom have intersectional identities, just people who historically have not had a seat at the table?
I think the number one for me is just to listen. I think especially when you are somebody, and I guess for myself, I'm a white, cisgender, heterosexual person, so I have a level of privilege just by way of who I was born as. And so then I think as it's my role then to be quiet and listen. And if I see that there is somewhere that I think that I can add value by being an ally or bringing something to the table, then that's when I can use my voice and use that to amplify others. But really, I think at this moment, the time now is to sit back and listen. And if you feel like someone isn't able to speak, maybe approach them and ask, is there a way that we can assist you or amplify this? Or could you even give me something that I could say on your behalf? I really feel like it's imperative that we are listening to the people that have the knowledge and the wisdom and,
So listen and ask when you don't know.
Yeah.
Again, without putting too much weight on a person who might be carrying a lot already.
Absolutely.
All right, I'll open this up. Actually, Rachel, I'd like to come to you just for thoughts as we sort of close off our discussion. What's running through your head in terms of supporting each other in law?
I'm going to just share a comment from a dear friend of mine, Marjorie Bocage, who's a Two-Spirit elder and supports communities across Saskatchewan. And she has always said, and this may be controversial, I hate this concept of inclusion. And the reason she says that is because she said, it makes me feel like I was never included in the first place. And that's always been a really profound point of departure for me. And it makes me think about how often inclusion is reactionary. We seek to include after someone has been excluded. And so in thinking about how to provide more space at that table, it really makes me think about how we can be proactive, how we can invest in things. We're not waiting for harm to occur. We're not waiting for that moment where we recognize who's not there. We're doing that planning in advance. We're strategizing about how to ensure that all voices are at that table from the start. Not just that they're there, but that they are heard, that there are cohorts in place, that there's safety in place. And so it's a roundabout way, but that's something that always comes to me when I think about inclusion, and I think it's a valuable lesson.
All right, Jaime, I'd love to hear from you.
So I know that at least for myself, when I think about various things, one of the things that is always front and center for myself is the idea of what does this actually really mean? What is this actually showing, right? Because we see this and it says creating a seat at the table. Well, that's good, but yet it's still, you're going to a table, right? Why is this not creating a sharing circle or creating, land, like something out in the land, or, sitting down on a pillow or meditate, like that's some of those things, right? So it's like we may be doing this, but we're still going to their table. That is what we see, and we're basically just allowing that type of thinking to keep going. And I know that for myself, I really kind of hope that people do change while they're in law school, right? Like I taught Saskatchewan for a while, and I can tell you that there's a lot of change that needs to get done. So it's like, don't be afraid to change, but I think that change needs to it's about what you said, like what are your values? What do you want to see in this world, right? What is it that will make it a better place, not just for you, but for more?
And I'll come to you, Chris, just as you've been sitting, absorbing what the others are saying. Any thoughts just before we go?
I hear comments about being in the present moment, and it's something that I did not understand throughout my legal career. It's become a buzzword now, but even though you think you're in the present moment, I would challenge you to investigate what the present moment truly is. I think I was naturally inclined that way because I grew up on a farm and I had lots of animal friends, literally, and going into law was so foreign for me. I was a fish out of water. And so the present moment is crucial, I believe. And love and combating hate, those are all values. And those are part of the whole recipe for who you are. That's more important than what you're learning right now in law school, in my opinion. And I'm sorry to say that, but it is important to fundamentally understand the legal principles, but it is very critical to understand the human dynamics and who you are as a person to then take those legal principles and the facts of your cases to do the right thing, and it's a process.
Thank you, Chris. And Adrienne?
I will just say that one of the things I did not realize when I was in law school, but I now know, is that there are people out there just like me who need a lawyer just like me.
That's fair. Yeah. Beth, any just thoughts as we wrap our discussion? We are looking for questions, and we'll be able to use the mics at the sides, but I would like to give Beth the last word here.
Yes, I think all of the things that have been said are really important. I think the law is an important institution, and you have to figure out where you belong in relation to the law and the legal profession, and how you're going to make a contribution to helping the law serve society. And I think that all of the things that have been said about being reflective about who you are and what you want, and how that positions you to take your place in the legal profession. I think all of that is good advice.
All right, this is the part where if there is something that's just a little bit on your mind or one word that's been sticking, we've got our microphones here. And if you can introduce yourself first, that would be great.
My name is Fakiha. Thank you so much. Chris, in your chapter, you talk a lot about centering your practice around love and channeling emotions and empathy. And that's kind of a theme in the book, finding strength and empathy. So that's my question. How have you found that to be your strength, and how do you recommend we can integrate that into our practice and work?
As I became a more confident lawyer, I began to speak more in terms of the importance of relationships and love. You pick your terms, but I have those discussions with my clients, including rising above all of the abusive language and relationships that we have to deal with as lawyers. It can be very messy. And so I have found that the use of the power of love and the concept of listening and accepting the conflict for what it is, and then having the confidence to advise my clients that there is no winning this. If you allow yourself to say the things you're saying to me right now in my office, to the opposing party, it's not going to help your case, it's going to make it worse. So you start to implement the use of human dynamics in your everyday work with your clients. And I am blown away by how powerful it is, because most of my clients get it eventually. They understand, and they are capable of conducting themselves in a more mature way, and it's very productive for their case. So there are ways that you can utilize concepts of love, as Gandhi did. I use that in my chapter, when he convinced hundreds of thousands of Indians not to attack the foe, but rather to let them throw rocks and beat them, and how powerful that was to the independence of India. I just think it's a story that is worth reflecting on, because it is the power of love in motion in recent history.
I know that, sorry, this is Jaime. One of the things, though, is that I believe also that sometimes when people have neurodiversity or anything else like that, it's kind of hard sometimes to read other people, right? So it's good to have empathy and love and the human dynamics, but sometimes understanding those human dynamics can be extra difficult. So I think that that's also something that, if you are aware that you're neurodivergent or like atypical or neurospicy, right? Maybe it is a good idea to ask and to seek and to help. I usually put big caveats on everyone when I see them in the evening, that I tell them my medication is worn off, so my ideas are going to be popcorn, I might interrupt you, and I am apologizing already. But it's an awareness that I understand that this is now no longer a socially acceptable thing to do. However, it is also something that I can't 100% not do.
I'd like to go to our next mic for a question.
Hi, my name's Amy. I was just wondering, oftentimes the fight for equality is viewed as the fight for superiority of one group, and I was just wondering, how do you combat that, if you've ever experienced that in the legal profession? Just your thoughts.
You sort of reflected on this already a little bit, Chris. Is there anybody else who'd like to give it a shot?
This is Jaime. I see a lot of this sometimes when it is like juxtaposed between the Indigenous and then others that are not Indigenous. Right? I know that Saskatchewan here at the law school in and of itself has also gotten a lot of flack about denigrating Western ideas, denigrating like the legal system, and then people coming out and saying that, you know, this is putting Indigenous worldviews or Indigenous peoples above, right? Or even that they get special rights or something like that. And I don't see it necessarily as that. It's like, it's the idea that there should be equity out there, and that equity will look different, right? You don't treat a 8-week-old puppy the same way that you do an 8-year-old dog, right? But I know that I have received a lot of that with then you think you're special or you think that you're privileged, and the thing is that it's not necessarily that way. And if it is about the equality making somebody think that it's superior, it's because that system has already been broken, right? It is because somebody wants to be on top and wants to do that. Whereas if we did sit in a circle and did do that, no one would be on top.
Hi, everyone. My name is Griffin. I'm a 2L law student here. Thank you guys again so much for coming in and sharing your stories. I feel like I personally learned a lot. One thing that I wanted to kind of ask you guys is, as our understanding of like social justice and different social dynamics develops, we start to place more of an emphasis on intersectionality and the interplay between things like gender, race, ability, class, all that type of stuff. So given all these different identities that can come into play in any given social problem, do you feel like it's difficult to identify problems that are pervasive across, an experience that all women might have? Or do you feel like it's difficult for you to weigh in on your experience as a woman, even as a woman, given the unbelievable kind of smattering of experiences people can have with the female identity?
Okay, being a woman and intersectionality. Rachel, go.
I'll take a stab at this, and I think this also connects to the question that was asked just before as well about questions around, are there competing interests, right? Are there limited pieces of the pie? That's usually the language that I use. And I think that comes from, especially in lots of contexts, a history where we are taught to compete as women, as different social groups, as different cultural groups. We are. When you're not in those positions of power, you're kind of jockeying for position and taught that that is the way to access space. When in fact, I think shifting that, I think something so powerful that intersectional movements have shown us is that we are already very intersectional. Every single one of us in this room has multiple identities all of the time. We're already living at many different access points. And so when it comes to these questions of, okay, so how do we form groups and movements and work together without reifying specific identities, I think we are already doing it, and we want to recognize the ways in which we can build these grounded relationalities, these ways in which for this specific moment we can work around a shared identity, and it really matters. And that doesn't mean that we are excluding the intersections within that. And that's where paying attention to who's around that table, even within specific groups, is really valuable. And we also want to look at the laws that we access, which as of right now don't do a great job of recognizing intersectionality, but that doesn't mean that they won't in the future. It doesn't mean that they're not able to recognize how we all have these intersecting identities.
Thank you. I hope that helps. That is all the time that we have today, and you just heard from Dr. Rachel Loewen-Walker, Professor of Gender Studies here at the U of S, Dr. Jaime Lavallee. She is from the University of Saskatchewan. She is now a professor here. Chris Glazer is KC and partner senior litigator at McKercher. Amelia Lowe-Muller, counsel with the Saskatchewan Health Authority, and Adrienne Forgeron is the gentle lawyer. She has her own practice here in Saskatoon. Let's give them all a hand. Thank you so much for making the time for us today. And thank you also to our co-host, to Beth Bilson, along with Leah Howie and Bree Lowenberger. All three of these women created and co-edited Creating a Seat at the Table, Reflections from Women in Law. So a round of applause to you. Thank you. And yes, the book is out. You can buy it at McNally Robinson, at Turning the Tide, at the U of S bookstore. You can order it online from Amazon or from the University of Regina Press. And I'd like to also thank the Women in Law Club and our audience members here for joining us on this special podcast taping of Dear Beth, a Women in Law podcast. And you can catch us on Apple, on Spotify, wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Jennifer Quesnel.